Glorious Geeks! I am so excited to be back. We have so much to discuss. You know you really love your job when you have an exhausting vacation because of kids, and all you want to do is return to the insanity of world news. Hello. Before we start, you know what to do. Please hit that subscribe button below and like this video. The situation in Afghanistan is actively getting worse. The Taliban has announced a government made up of a group of well-known thugs and terrorists, which doesn't exactly bode well for those who say they hope the Taliban will become more tolerant. And our friends and allies around the world are not so pleased with us. In fact, British ministers have called President Biden doolally and gaga. Biden ignored British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's calls for 3 days. 1-800 White House. Hello, White House Pizza. What's your order? Joe, I know it's you. What you did in Afghanistan is unacceptable. President Trump was right to call you Sleepy Joe. Oh, bugger, he hung up on me. There's a lot of confusion, so I took some questions over Instagram and I've brought on an amazing guest you'll hear from in a minute, someone who fled Afghanistan along with his family 2 days after the collapse. Casey Gottlieb asked, what could we have done differently? Well, I think Biden could have negotiated staying a few extra months to leave in the winter when there's less fighting. And since the Taliban wasn't upholding all the conditions of the deal it struck with Trump, Biden had some leverage to negotiate. But if Biden wasn't willing to leave later, which clearly was the case, then I don't know why the US didn't start evacuating Afghans earlier. In fact, I remember saying that back in June. It's a lose-lose situation with mostly bad options. So right now, we need to focus on securing our troops, evacuating Afghan interpreters and others who helped us there, and put in place some tough financial policies that'll undermine the Taliban as much as possible. Ultimately, though, the Taliban takeover was likely inevitable, whether we left 10 years ago or in 6 more months. Sydney Heath asks, how can the US promote human rights in Afghanistan now? I'm not gonna lie to you, Sydney, it's not looking good. We're not going to have a lot of leverage over the Taliban to get them to not abuse Afghans. Even if you sanction the Taliban more heavily, that should help undermine them, but it doesn't mean they're going to behave differently. And the countries we're going to use to help negotiate with the Taliban are not exactly human rights lovers themselves, like China, Pakistan, Qatar, and Turkey. And I wouldn't hold my breath thinking the Taliban will change its ways, since they've been killing people in the Panjshir region of Afghanistan and have been brutally beating women who were protesting in the country's capital. The US can help the human rights situation, though, by directly and secretly supporting Afghan activists and independent journalists who can document atrocities. All right, last question from Mercedes Arslanyan, who asks, did Turkey say they support the Taliban? Yeah, sorta. The Turkish foreign minister said the Taliban statements when they took over the country were positive. Not really the message you want to give to a group of terrorists that overthrow a government. You know who actively supports the Taliban, though? Pakistan. In fact, their intelligence chief traveled to Afghanistan to meet with the Taliban a few days ago. What you doing there, buddy? Enjoying the view? Okay, before we wrap up, I'm so excited about my guest because he offered insight into how things were during the collapse, how his family evacuated, and what most Afghans are concerned about right now. My friend Morgan Ortegas introduced us, and I'm so grateful. His name is Saeeq Shajjan, and he's the founder and managing partner of the law firm Shajjan & Associates. Saeeq is from Afghanistan, and he lived here for a while when he went to Harvard to study law, but he went back to Afghanistan to help people, and he built a successful life there. But only 3 weeks ago, he and his family had to flee, and as he says, they were one of the lucky ones. Saeeq, thank you so much for joining me on Oh My World. We are so lucky to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So listen, I really want to ask you about what was going on in your mind when you were leaving Afghanistan. You left right after the collapse. What was going on in your mind? Did you expect to have to flee so quickly? Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, that is very difficult to explain it because this was something that I'd never thought of. I studied in the States. I went to Harvard Law School, but I chose to go back to Afghanistan to help my people. In doing so, I started a very successful law practice in Afghanistan. I was able to help like so many people by providing them employment opportunities. And when this happened, not only me, but I think no one was really prepared for it. And all what I can tell you that I still am thinking about it. I still cannot believe it, that what happened, how it all happened, and how I lost everything that I worked so hard to build over the last 10, 11 years.
It's unbelievable. What was the scene you saw at the airport? What was it like? Was it chaos? How did it all feel?
Well, it was very chaotic. At the same time, it was very, very scary because you would really not understand what's going to happen next, because you're going through a crowd of thousands of people trying to get to the airport. And at the same time, you're trying to pass by the Taliban, who are not really well trained, or I would say not trained at all, to deal with such a crowd. They know nothing about such crisis management or stuff like that. And most of them, they would be very young kids of 16, 15, 17, right? So it's very difficult to expect something rational from them. They would be shooting in there every now and then, trying to push the crowd back. It was really scary, not only for me, but I think it was scary for everyone, for my parents who are old now, for my children who had never seen something like this. Someone would be fighting close to their ears. But still, I would say I was one of the luckiest people that we got out of there so quickly. This is not true for so many other people. There are people that they tried like for 5 or 6 days to get inside the airport. They couldn't manage it. They're still left behind.
I'm so glad that you and your family got out. I can't imagine what you had to go through or how it must feel now to have to start over at this stage of your life. And I'm hoping that the United States and other partners can get more Afghans out. Can you tell us a little bit about what is going on in the minds of Afghans right now?
I think it's very difficult for them. Whenever I speak with someone back home, they're really concerned about their future. They have no hope for the future of the country. They have no hope for themselves. And no one is working right now. I see that a lot of people are talking about women not being allowed to go to the offices, but at the same time, I think we're dealing with a crisis that literally no one is allowed to work. You're not allowed to work if you were a government employee. You're not allowed to work if you're in private sector. So it's like 25 days since they've taken over. And literally the country is shut down. No one is doing anything. And it's a very, very, very difficult situation. And on top of that, if you have got money in your bank account, you're not able to access them. So that is the actual crisis that people of Afghanistan are thinking about now.
Well, Saeeq, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your story and your thoughts. I'm so appreciative.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
El Salvador has become the first country to declare Bitcoin as legal tender, which means that people in El Salvador can pay their debt with Bitcoin. So El Salvador's president claims he did this to make it cheaper for Salvadorians to send and receive money, since so many of them rely on remittances from abroad. 1 in 5 Salvadorians rely on remittances to get by, but families have to pay fees on those remittances. In fact, the president claims that Salvadorians paid $400 million just in fees, so he says working in Bitcoin will reduce that. He also says the move to Bitcoin will allow people who have no access to a bank account to have financial services. And that's true. But it seems like a lot of Salvadorians don't like the move, since a survey found that 70% of them are opposed to it. Most people surveyed didn't even really understand what Bitcoin is. Now, after the Salvadorian government purchased the Bitcoins, the value of Bitcoin dropped 17%. That's a good sign. Now, cryptocurrency is not my jam, so my researchers rounded up how experts have reacted. In July, Moody's downgraded El Salvador's credit rating in response to the passing of this Bitcoin law. The World Bank said it couldn't help El Salvador with the adoption of Bitcoin given environmental and transparency shortcomings. And the IMF has warned all countries against making cryptocurrencies legal tender, saying that it could threaten macroeconomic stability given crypto's links to illicit activity. I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't tell you how things are going to turn out in El Salvador. But in my experience, when you have experts waving a red flag, things don't usually turn out so well. I want to talk about a faraway land, a place with rich natural resources, but where democracy's in peril because of voting restrictions and because of an active assault on women. No, I'm not talking about Angola. I'm talking about Texas. Texas last week banned the vast majority of abortions by passing a law that prohibits a woman from getting an abortion once a fetal heartbeat is detected. So that's around 6 weeks, which for a lot of women is when they find out they're pregnant. Not only can they not get an abortion after that, but they can't even do it if they've been raped or in cases of incest. And in order to avoid being sued, Texas is asking and incentivizing private citizens to enforce this law by offering them $10,000 and covering their legal fees if they sue abortion providers or anyone who helps a woman get an abortion. Way to unify your people, Texas. Meanwhile, over in Mexico, which is one of the world's largest Catholic countries, women's rights and health activists achieved a huge feat this week when Mexico decriminalized abortion. Now, I could list the many reasons why this legislation is dangerous and unconstitutional, unconstitutional. And I find it a bit odd that a group of older men are forcing women to become mothers, but don't feel they should force anyone to wear a mask in a global pandemic. The thing is, though, I can't exactly dish it on other countries that are walking back women's rights, like Poland and Turkey, which we've talked about here, and then not point the finger at a bunch of politicians in my own country. And given that U.S. foreign aid currently goes to support women's health around the world, including for abortions as needed, it seems a little hypocritical when we've got a state here that's actively working against it. I'm going to be watching next month when the Supreme Court hears a case that challenges Roe v. Wade. In the meantime, the Texas governor and other leaders that pushed for this abhorrent and abusive bill are on my shit list this week. This is such an awesome story, and thank you to my friend Maureen Polo for sharing it with me. Polly Venetto is a former flight attendant who's pushing an airline beverage cart from Boston, Massachusetts, all the way to Ground Zero in New York City to honor the fallen crew members who died on 9/11 and whose bravery is often overlooked. Polly will arrive to Ground Zero with his beverage cart on September 11, exactly 20 years after the attacks took place. And the path he's taking is the same path the crew of United Flight 175 took before it crashed into one of the World Trade Center towers. Polly could have been on that flight, but he wasn't because he had worked the previous weekend. And after he lost a number of his crew member friends in the attack, he fell into a decade-long struggle with addiction. He says that a miracle happened in 2015, where he realized his mission would be to pay tribute to these brave flight attendants and honor them for the heroes that they are. So as Polly walks the 200 miles from Boston to New York, mind you, he's clearly in shape, but this is not some 18-year-old triathlete. It kind of makes me feel like it's time to hit the gym. He's also helping raise money for the families of 9/11 victims, so be sure to visit pollyspush.com to donate. Polly, I think you are a hero and you are such an inspiration, and thanks to your efforts, your colleagues will always be remembered as heroes. Thanks, Geeks, and thank you for having me. I am so happy to be back at it. Stay tuned for some exciting developments and announcements coming soon. And before you go, please hit that subscribe button below and like this video. And if you have any questions, feedback, or stories you want me to talk about, I will obviously give you a shout out, so please leave a comment or reach out to me directly on the socials. Stay fabulous.